listening to the Like and Follow podcast, presented by Milkbar Digital.
Welcome to the Like and Follow podcast, a podcast exploring social media and digital marketing presented by Milkbar Digital. My name's Ben and I'll be your host this week. And this week we're all about that tone of voice. And to join me in talking about tone of voice and see if we can unravel some of the secrets to it, I've joined here by Bea. Bea, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Ben.
Let's talk about what you are here at Milkbar Digital and why you're such an expert at tone of voice in different brands.
So I'm a social media manager here at Milkbar Digital, which means that I constantly have to speak on social media on behalf of a client.
Right, yep.
Which means having to speak in many different tones of voices. So I guess that's why I feel very passionate about the topic.
So when you say you speak on behalf of a bunch of different, how many are we talking? Are we talking a couple, 3, 4? Or how many, is there a range at a time, or is this across a whole, like a longer time period? What are we talking?
Yeah. So I guess like at any given point, I'll be probably writing copy, captions, creating content for at least 3 clients. But considering the nature of the work and the fact that we're an agency, across the year that I've been working in this role, I've probably encountered and written for 10, 20 different brands. Yeah, so it's quite a lot to take on in terms of constantly swapping the way that you write.
Yeah, and I think I'm in a similar boat myself.
Yeah.
I do a lot of community management here at Milkbar, so that basically means managing the community that appears on a Facebook page, which also comes with it, a number of different clients who have a different tone of voice from one to the other.
Exactly.
And what my question is now is that how do you handle changing from one tone of voice to another?
It's quite, I think you'd probably feel the same thing. It's almost like intrinsic now, hey? Because you're quite used to your clients. You have, I don't know if you have like a little voice in your head. It's almost like a different persona that you take on, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
It's like when you get into the role of that client and that brand, you sort of already know how you're meant to be speaking to their customers.
Yeah.
But I think at the start, it's much more of an active thought when you're writing for another client. Would you agree?
I think that's really true. It does depend on whatever the client is after as well.
Exactly.
In terms of how they want their brand to be presented on social media. And to be fair, you kind of have to toe the line a little bit.
Yes, exactly.
With what they're after, and my challenge with any tone of voice is always to see how I can keep the basic structure of what they're wanting to present and how I can use that to put my own little spin on those sort of things.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always circumstantial as well.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're writing copy, it's almost more straightforward. You sort of have the words that you use, the emojis that you use, the phrasings that you use. But I imagine when you start doing community management, you don't know what's coming towards you. And then you have to adapt to the way that you use language to respond to comments.
And depending on the severity of the comment as well.
Severity.
Well,
yes.
You know what I mean?
If
there's a high level complaint, you're not going to respond to them.
Emojis,
You're probably going to ditch the emojis.
Yes, exactly. It's always, so I have a client and, depending on the severity of the comment, I'm either responding with love or warm regards. It's one or the other, and that's like a big tonal shift for me.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah, you can't with love someone who's just complained.
No, and I don't think it would come off too well.
I don't think so either, no.
I think that's one of the most important parts of tone of voice, I think, is that it is how a brand chooses to explore their own personality online. Have you run into any clients or examples of brands that have sort of not really known what they want to do in terms of their tone of voice?
Totally. I mean, so because we work with such a variety of brands in, I guess, scale, you'll find that the bigger brands will give you a full tone document that will have, words they love, words they don't love, even examples of things we might say, things we won't say. And that's such clear guidance. It makes our job a lot easier. But then I've had like small startups who maybe haven't really invested too much in their branding yet and won't have a tone document. And that's when it gets challenging, because that's when you're sort of, I guess, making it up yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah. And that's probably when it gets challenging in terms of best practice, like how you actually develop a tone, and also like whose role that is, whether it should be the client who sort of gives guidance, or whether us as sort of like professionals and putting on our little thinking hats for social media will be like, this makes sense for the brand. Yeah, I think that's a challenge.
When it comes to a brand jumping on social, do you think it's important for them to really have a think about what their tone of voice is, how they want to present, not only just the creative and what they want to look like, but how they sound as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's more important than most brands give like credit to it.
Yeah.
I think people don't realize, they think that the image, and the image is of course important, the visual side of things, but the tone is complementary to that. And if it doesn't match up, or if it's not exciting, you're not doing the platform justice. It gives you the opportunity to caption your images for a reason.
Yeah.
It's how you can communicate so much personality. And I think not only in kind of like the captions of your creative, but in talking back, because that's social media. It's the fact that you're not just putting stuff out there, but you're speaking back to people who are engaging with you. And that's when I think tone of voice is really pivotal.
Yeah.
What do you think? Because you work mostly, I mean, now you're doing some caption writing too, but mostly you're talking to customers, actually having conversations. So how do you find like figuring out someone's tone if they haven't given it to you?
Well, I think in terms of my clients especially, a lot of them have, like a couple of them have quite structured, like, here's our tone of voice, here's how we like to respond to people, here is some words and what have you. Surprisingly, one of my bigger clients doesn't really have a tone of voice document.
Okay.
But through just the combined nature of all of their other creative and copy and everything, I've been able to, I guess, create the ideal tone of voice for that brand. And I think it's part of our job as well. I think we should be working in conjunction and like making a collaborative effort to work with our clients to see what that tone of voice can be and create that personality that that appears on the brand's social media pages.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's very important to be able to look at what you've got in front of you in terms of creative, copy, whatever you have. Even the people that work with the brand, the clients, the managers, the marketing people, whoever you're working with, and see what their personality is. And see how you can use little bits and pieces into what you're responding to people with.
Totally agree with that. And I think another good way to sort of find your tone, as it were, is to look at how customers are already speaking to the brand. Because I think, I guess there are exceptions, but as a general rule, you want to be speaking the same language as the people you're trying to market to, right? So I think that's always a good way if you've just gotten a new brand and you're not sure about, I guess, their tone of voice, is exactly to look at their internal team, to look at the creatives they already have, but then also, their community already, if they have one.
It's if you're talking to a community that's already there, you want to talk to them in language that they understand and they find familiar.
Yeah, their humor, their like lingo, even lingo is a big one, and like how they use emojis. I always love to mimic. It's almost like parroting the person who's talking to you as a brand. So if they've used a lot of like heart emojis and all, like XXX at the end, you sort of want to mimic it back so that they feel like you're a familiar voice that they've been speaking to. It's all about creating that friendship with that person. Exactly. It's sort of like how when you first meet a person like at a bar, or you're like speaking to a friend of a friend, you start to mimic their lingo. It's sort of the same thing when it comes to brands, I think.
By mimicking somebody in real life, I mean, I'm doing this right now. If you're looking at what
We're mirroring each other.
it makes the other person feel a lot more comfortable.
That's it. Yeah.
Because, these are things that you're already familiar with. These are things that you already see in day to day or you're using in day to day. So it's much easier to respond to somebody in a way that they feel is comforting and familiar to them.
Exactly.
Rather than giving them something they don't understand, that immediately places a brick wall in between you.
I agree. Do you ever find it challenging to take on like a tone of voice that's really foreign to you compared to how you would normally behave in your life, I guess?
I think my experience is very different to a lot of people's with this. I come from quite an extensive performance background.
Okay, cool.
So I've done a very limited, but I've done acting, I've done radio, I've done a whole bunch of different live-based performances where I've had to come in as a different character.
Yeah.
And create that character even on the spot sometimes. Cool. So I think that helps a lot with what I do in terms of tone of voice and being able to take the role that somebody else has already been doing and put my own little spin on it.
Yeah.
What about yourself? Because you've had so many, you were saying, over 20 even in the last year. How do you find it?
At the start, I think I found it pretty challenging. I still do find it quite challenging in terms of all the other things I do for my role. I would say that's like one of the more challenging ones for me because I do find that I'll automatically start writing in a way that I would ordinarily write, or like what I think the brand should sound like. So I think it's pretty tough, and that's when I find those tone of voice documents so helpful. I'll actually have them up. I'll have like the keywords and everything. I think I also find personas quite helpful to me. So even if a brand doesn't give me a document with a persona, I like to try to make stuff up about like certain personas or like what the brand would like / not like. I remember one of the first brands I had when I first started, we were mostly speaking to, I would call them like your Facebook mum. Okay. as a general category. And I'd never written that tone before.
Right.
And so part of it was, watching the way that the customers spoke to the brand and then trying to mimic it was also just being like, what would a mum like and what would a mum, how would she speak on social media? And of course we're talking in like stereotypes and generalizations as we kind of have to as marketers. But I think that helped too, to just be like, all right, when I'm like in this brand and in this brand's tone, I am a mum. I am a 40-year-old mother with children and I love complaining about my kids, but I love them, you know what I mean? Yeah. You sort of like have to, and I guess it's like you said, kind of like acting, right? You really just have to get into character. Like normally for me and my community management, it's just like question answer and then kind of the end of the combo. So I don't really need to maintain that tone for too long. But have you ever been in like a discussion where they just start like actually just conversing with you and you got to just be in character?
There have been quite a number of times that I've had to do that. Especially with some of the clients that I work with. Yeah. They have they try and be as conversational with people as they possibly can. Okay. And the customers that they bring in also like to have a bit of a conversation, which can provide like some lengthy discussion about smaller topics that don't really get to where you can find the natural cutoff point in the conversation. Do you have like like a funny or just like very memorable combo? It's like weird. There's a number of conversations that I can recall where it's literally just back and forth. Hi, how are you? I'm good. And it just keeps going on until I decide, well, I have to do some more work on something else. So I'm just going to leave this.
You're going to leave them on scene.
Yeah. And then they'll come back, a little bit later and say, oh, you didn't reply. And it's like, well,
no.
I do have
I'm a brand.
I have other things to do. I'm a brand. I don't.
Yeah.
Technically, I don't exist as a person.
Yes.
So.
But isn't that funny? Because we're all of our work is trying to almost like convince the customers that we do exist as a person, that this brand is speaking to you, and then what happens when they actually, you know, like take you up on the offer? They're like, cool, give me some advice. Tell me about your weekend. And you're like, oh God.
And look, the idea behind it all is that, we do exist as brands, as people. But the reality of the situation is we also have a lot of other different things that we need to get done in our day.
Your favorite brand actually doesn't have time to talk to you about your crush.
We can do our best.
Yes.
I'm happy to have
on a slow day.
Yeah, if we've got nothing else to do.
We'd love to. Yeah.
I think it does come down to, like, if you show people a bit of compassion and a bit of interest in what they're after, they'll show the same back to you. And I'm not saying that I don't enjoy having these conversations with people, because it's nice.
It is
a lot of the other time in my day, I'm responding to easy questions, hard questions, and sometimes complaints as well. Yeah. So to have it something that was, quite easy to continue on and like be involved in, it feels nice.
It does feel nice. Yeah. Do you ever, I think this is like sort of, I guess, the double-edged sword of when you start to become so personable with your customers and have that real curated tone of voice, is then as like community managers, how much you have to remember about individual customers, because they'll continue a conversation with you as if you should remember their past history because it has been so personal. Yeah. But we're communicating, like you said, with 10s, 20s, but like so many people per day. How are we meant to remember it's that, oh yeah, you commented on this image and then we had that convo and now you're talking about, you know what I mean? Like maintaining that is going to be interesting.
Yeah, I think that's something that's for people in community management, you really have to be aware of. Yeah. Is that there are people that will comment on multiple posts with some sort of through line in that conversation. Yeah. And if it's on the same day, that's great, because my memory is not that great that I won't, but I can recall something that's happened in the same day in the conversation.
Good to know.
But when it comes to like they'll comment maybe once every 2.5 weeks, then it gets to a point where you got to go, okay, I recognize this name, but why do I recognize this name? Yeah. Yeah. So you kind of have to go back through the mental Rolodex and go, oh, yep, that's right. We had a conversation about this and that and this. And
yeah, it can be tricky. I remember one of my clients, there was someone who loved commenting on kind of like you said, one every like 10 posts. They would comment something pretty generic, just like, love this, it looks great kind of thing. But I had to catch myself, because mostly you sort of respond in a similar way. If someone leaves a generic comment, kind of like, oh, like, thank you so much, hope you can come in and try it sometime, if it's like food, for example. But if they keep doing that, you can't also then keep responding the same way. You have to be like, glad you liked this as well. You sort of want to, in your language, show that you've noticed them and that it is like a relationship between the brand and the client or the customer. And that's when it's tricky. Yeah. Yeah.
That's not to say that that's a bad thing about, having a great tone of voice. Yes. That's exactly what you want.
That's what you want. It makes it harder, but that's good branding on social media.
That's what it is. That's what you want out of the whole thing.
Exactly. Obviously, you sort of need to maintain your tone of voice throughout like all communication, but is there something to be said about kind of like a default tone or like a really professional tone of voice, especially if you have a more playful brand, that you have to fall back on when it's like crisis mode?
I do think there is something to be said about a crisis mode.
Crisis mode tone.
Yeah, crisis mode tone. I do think you need to have a fallback that you can go, okay, yeah, this is a serious issue.
Yeah.
We have to deal with this. And I would hope that most people would be able to work out when to use that tone. If not, I usually go by the idea that I'm sending an email to a doctor.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I want to get
Respectful.
as much information in there as possible about the situation. I want to show that I have these thoughts about the situation, and I want to be able to explain it in a method that is going to be easy to understand for somebody, but also conveys like, this is a serious issue and I'm taking it seriously.
Good advice. It's funny because I think, at least for all of the brands I've worked with, maybe all the brands you've worked with, there is that crisis mode tone. But I have seen some really iconic social media brands who never drop the tone.
Wow.
Yeah, so like they'll I wish I could remember the name now of the brand. So there's this one brand, and they'll screenshot complaints that people have sent and post it on their Instagram stories with like their same like kind of just like jokey, dumb, blokey tone.
Yeah.
And just like respond that way, but in like really sarcastic, ridiculous ways. But people love it because they think like, yeah, that's right. Like you don't break character ever. Like that's kind of what it should be. Do you have any thoughts on that? What do you think of that?
I think that's very, very specific for very specific brands. And I don't think that's something that you would necessarily take to something that is either already established or getting started.
Yeah, true. True. You need to be.
You need to build that very gradually, and you need to be very careful on how you build that sort of tone of voice, I think.
Yeah.
It does, a lot of people do like that tone of voice and they think it's funny to be
Yes.
part of a joke like that.
Exactly.
But you have to pick your battles with that.
Yes.
You can't really be doing that if you're, say, a restaurant and people are complaining about the food. And if, say, for example, if somebody sends you a complaint saying, your food made me sick, you can't really go, well, yeah, what did you think you were eating at this place?
Yes.
You have to balance it up.
Yeah, I think it depends on definitely the nature of the complaint. I remembered what the brand is now. I can say it, right? It's not one of our brands. Mona. I always want to say MoMA or Mona.
Yeah.
Museum of Old and New Art. So they like screenshot, I guess like negative feedback that they get. But I think it's because like as well as tone of voice, their whole branding is around being disruptive, being unconventional.
Yeah.
That it almost works. But I agree, if the negative comment was about someone slipping and falling and hurting themselves in your establishment, they probably wouldn't. They would have a fallback tone of voice.
Yeah.
But if it's about like your museum is friggin' weird, then they can treat that.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, you're not our target customer. We don't really care about your opinions. In fact, it helps our brand to respond to you in the tone of voice that we've established.
Yeah.
So I think like a fine line is sort of where it's at, and how to dance that is interesting and difficult.
Yes, it certainly is. Thank you very much for joining me, Bea. I think that's been some really interesting stuff
Yeah,
about
it's
tone
been
of
fun.
voice. If you've learned anything from this episode, or if you would like to learn more, send us an email at hello@milkbardigital.com.au. And remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the podcast, because this is, of course, like and follow.
Yes.
We'll see you next week.